If you learn English, you'll be able to speak English. If you learn English, you'll be able to speak the native language of the world's richest people, or even become one, like Jack Ma. English is not just a language anymore. It's the language. You want to code? English. Global business? English. Academic research, any communication on Unicom are all in English. English is so prevalent that I chose Russian as my major in college, only to find that people were speaking English to communicate during the summer camp at the Дипломатической академии МИД РФ. So, why is English dominating the world? Colonialism laid the foundation. Then the consistently higher birth rates within English colonies and sustained immigration incentives created a self-reinforcing cycle of population growth that quickly outnumbered other colonies. Unlike Spaniards, French, and Dutch, whose economic model was mainly extractive or fur trade-oriented, the English settled down and created common law and governance structures. Early education systems were reinforced by Americanization policies that actively promoted English literacy and assimilation. French speakers were absorbed after the Louisiana Purchase, and Spanish speakers were integrated following the Mexican-American War.
But they don't even make the effort to learn ours.
Win a war sometime.
During this time, not only harsh methods were taken to suppress French and Spanish, but English language media also played a crucial role in standardizing the language. By staying out of wars on its own land and making money selling weapons and supplies, the US quietly built up its strength until it accidentally showed the world just how powerful it really was. The power is not just manifested through hard power like cutting-edge technology and economic influence, but also through soft power like Hollywood movies, music, and art. Our human nature, the pursuit of power, the desire to learn from the best, to be part of what seems strong, successful, and promising, pushes us to learn English. So in some way, I can say that people learn English not merely out of interest, but out of necessity to access opportunities, resources, and to feel connected to a global narrative largely shaped in English. In that sense, the fact that most Americans remain monolingual becomes somewhat understandable. Because if Klingon had the world's most advanced technology and economy, there are about 1.52 billion English speakers in the world right now. Most of them aren't native speakers, only 25% are native. The other 75%, that's over 1 billion people, learned it as a second or even third language like me. English is so common that I won't even bother to talk about where in the world it's spoken. It's like Microsoft's operating system. Whether it's an original copy or a pirate version, it's everywhere. So how did English develop? About 6,500 years ago, on the Eurasian steppe, nomadic tribes spoke Proto-Indo-European, the ancestor of 400-plus languages, from Hindi and Persian to Russian and English. English belongs to the West Germanic branch, with Frisian as its closest living relative. Want a feel for Old English? Look to Icelandic, which preserves the complex grammar English has mostly lost. The real story of English begins in the 5th century CE, when Germanic tribes, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, sailed to Britain and laid its foundations. Their dialects blended, morphed, and formed the foundation of Old English. And while it was Germanic at its core, Old English was never pure. From the very beginning, it had a habit that would later define it: borrowing. From the Celtic peoples who were already in Britain, English picked up only a handful of words. But some linguists argue that Celtic syntax left a deeper mark, especially in how English formed its continuous verb tenses, like I'm running, which isn't common across other Germanic languages. Then came the Romans, bringing Latin, not just armies, but also words. Street, plant, wine, cup, kitchen. Even cheese came with the Romans. A few centuries later, with the arrival of Christianity, Latin swept in again, this time through monasteries. Words like abbot, altar, candle, martyr, they weren't military imports, but cultural ones. And then came the Vikings. Words like flat, take, get, call, ugly, egg, husband, sister, window, die, even the word are from the verb to be comes from them. They even gave English the pronouns they, their, and them, replacing the older native forms. Just imagine the very words we use to talk about other people come from people who were only seen as foreign invaders. That's the kind of language English is. Absorbing, adapting, shaped by contact, sometimes peaceful, sometimes not, but always evolving. Fast forward to 1066. William the Conqueror rolls in from Normandy, wins the Battle of Hastings, and takes over England. Suddenly, French becomes the language of kings, courts, and contracts. If you were royalty or nobility, you spoke French. If you were a peasant, you spoke some Anglo-Saxon dialects, and the clergy used Latin. Eventually, these layers started to blend. Old English didn't die, it evolved into Middle English, heavily flavored by French. That's when English starts looking more like what we speak today. But the real legacy of this period was vocabulary overload. English absorbed thousands of French words for government, art, literature, law, medicine, fashion. By the end of it all, English had developed a wild habit of having 3 different words for the same thing, depending on how fancy you want it to sound. Then comes one of the weirdest moments in English history, the Great Vowel Shift. Around the 1400s, people basically decided, hey, let's pronounce all our vowels differently. Why? Nobody knows for sure. Some believe it was caused by massive social upheaval after the Black Death. People moved to new regions, accents mixed, and speech patterns began to shift. Others think it was a way for the rising middle class to distinguish themselves from the elite, sort of like a spoken fashion trend. There's even a theory that French influence after the Norman conquest nudged English vowels to shift over time. Whatever the cause, the results stuck, and English changed forever. Long vowels moved higher up in the mouth. For example, time used to sound like tim, and house like hus. But the spelling, it didn't keep up. That's why today we have words that look one way and sound completely different. English became what linguists call a deep orthography. Basically, how you write it doesn't always match how you say it. And a classic example is this syllable. By the 1500s, English was getting a serious upgrade. Thanks to the Renaissance, there was a huge revival of interest in ancient knowledge, Greek philosophy, Roman science, classical art. And with that revival came a flood of new words, especially from Latin and Greek. Suddenly, English could express complex ideas in science, medicine, and politics with words like radius, genius, democracy. The language wasn't just growing, it was transforming. Then, in the late 1400s, a machine changed everything. The printing press made books cheaper and easier to produce. And with more books came more readers. Literacy rates began to climb. Most books were printed in London, and that gave one particular dialect a serious boost, the Chancery Standard. It became the unofficial blueprint for written English across the country. For the first time, spelling started to settle. Grammar got a bit more consistent. And in 1604, the first English dictionary was published. It wasn't perfect, but it marked the beginning of a more standardized English. Still, compared to French or German, English remained flexible, playful, and loose. That looseness would prove useful. Then came the Empire. As Britain expanded into Asia, Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific, English didn't just travel, it grew. It picked up words from the people it encountered. Each of these words is a tiny echo of English's colonial history, a reminder that language often grows through contact and not always peaceful. By the 1800s, English was no longer just England's language. It was global, spoken, learned, and adapted by people across continents. Then came the machines. The Industrial Revolution created entire categories of human activity that had never existed before. And those things needed names. Words like steam engine, railway, telegraph, battery, electricity all became part of everyday vocabulary. And the momentum didn't stop. In the 20th century, the list exploded again. Telephone, radio, television, internet, email, hashtag, selfie. English adapted at incredible speed. Some terms were invented, others were borrowed or redefined, but in nearly every case, English became the default language of the modern world.
English, motherfucker! Do you speak it? Yes!
With the story I told at the beginning of this video, you clearly understand now why English is a global lingua franca. a bridge language spoken between people who don't share a native tongue. And let's talk about the English grammar. It seems simple at first. At its core, it's built on parts of speech: noun, adjective, adverb, article, preposition, verb, pronoun, numeral, conjunction, interjection. These are the tools we use to build all our sentences. One interesting thing about English, words are super flexible. Google is a noun and a verb. Up is a preposition, but you'll also hear it in the ups and downs. That kind of versatility is baked into the language's DNA. No noun genders, no endless verb endings, and adjectives stay the same. But English has 12 standard tenses split across 3 time frames: past, present, and future, and 4 aspects: simple, continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous. So present simple is used for facts, routines, and general truths. Present continuous for ongoing actions happening right now or around now. Present perfect for actions with a link to the present. Present perfect continuous for actions started in the past and still ongoing or recently stopped. Past simple for completed actions at a specific time in the past. Past continuous for actions in progress at a specific past time or interrupted by another action. Past perfect for an action completed before another past action. Past perfect continuous to emphasize the duration of an action before another past event. Future simple is for predictions, decisions made at the moment, or promises. Future continuous is for ongoing actions at a specific time in the future. Future perfect is for actions completed before a certain point in the future. Future perfect continuous is used for Future perfect continuous is used to emphasize the duration of an action up to a future point. So, oh my god. If we add the conditional ones, we have present real conditional, present unreal conditional, past unreal conditional, and mixed conditional. I still remember struggling with all these tenses. It's definitely complicated, but in everyday conversations, only a few are used regularly. It really depends on how precisely you want to express your thoughts, especially when it comes to time and subtle differences in meaning. So, another thing in English is modals: can, could, may, might, must, should. They help express possibility, necessity, or politeness. Articles, and the. But the can be so tricky. For example, I don't get why we need the before internet. There's only one internet, right? It's not like we need to be specific about which one. And prepositions, tiny words like in, on, at, by, with, from. But they cause big headaches because they often don't translate neatly, so it's better to learn them in chunks. On time, by chance, in love. Then there's phrasal verbs. These aren't just verb plus preposition. They act as totally new meanings. That's why they're tricky. I think phrasal verbs are the worst for English learners because there's no logic to them. You can't learn them. You just have to suffer until they feel natural. If we talk about English sentence structure, it normally goes SV when the verb does not involve an object. And then there's classic SVO structure and subject linking verb complement, subject verb object object complement, and subject verb indirect object and direct object. Noun clauses and adjective clauses. Here you need to know the difference between that and which. Use that when the information is necessary to identify the subject. Use which when the information is extra and set off with commas. Adverbial clauses. For direct speech and indirect speech, the tense has to match in indirect speech. Noun clauses and gerunds. These show how flexible English verbs can be. And in English, there's subject-verb agreement. Do support. English loves using do in questions or negatives, even when it means nothing. In other languages, you just flip the word order. But in English, do holds the grammar together. Passive voice, used when the focus is on the action, not the doer. Some things you can count and others you can't. Since English is a Germanic language, 83% of the most common 1,000 words are Germanic. It's absorbed words from everywhere like a sponge. Over 350 languages have contributed to English, and this ability to borrow and adapt is another reason why it's the dominant language today. So yeah, until an advanced extraterrestrial civilization shows up, we'll still need to learn English.